Welcome to this new video about understanding competitive strategy. Now we are studying the field of strategy. We know that the strategy is a way by which companies fit into the existing environment. Strategy is like a response to try to adapt a company on a sustainable way to try to be competitive, productive, and still having attractive products for our customers. Strategy is about getting sure that the company is going to survive and is going to generate profits for the long term. Strategy means change. And you also know about what we mean by strategic plan, which is the plan where we are going to make tangible, material, operational, all our decision to change, all our long-term plan strategy. Now, when we think about the strategy, one important concept that has to be taken into account is the idea of competitive strategy. I'm not going to talk about the plan, about the strategic plan, or about the change that we are going to make, if we are going to change based on trying to be more international or trying to innovate in products or trying to expand overseas and set a foothold in a different country, or adopting AI or anything like that. When we talk about competitive strategy, is the way we are going to develop our plan, the way we are going to develop our business model. So what does competitive strategy mean? It means that the company is gonna approach the change in a specific way. And this specific way can be based on two different dimensions. One is going to be cost-based, and the other one is going to be differentiation-based. Let me put you an example before we start with the idea of competitive strategy. All you know, automobiles, the automobile industry. Think about how different the strategy is if you are Ford on one side, or if you are BMW on the other side. As you can see, regardless of the type of response that they are giving to the EV, to the electric vehicle, each company competes on a different basis. What we can say that each company is competing on a different competitive strategy. In the case of Ford, Ford is aimed at lower end target segments. That means that Ford is trying to produce and finally sell products that are less priced, less expensive. So we can say that Ford is closer to this idea of cost-based approach. Therefore, the strategic response by Ford to adapt to the new environment and including driverless technologies or including these EVs, is going to be made on a more cost-based approach. So we can say that the competitive strategy at Ford is cost-based. On the other hand, if we have a look to BMW, which is a more high-end premium brand, the response that they are going to give to the EVs, it's totally different. They are going to change to EVs, or they are going to change to include all driverless technologies or the different technologies that are required now by the new environment, but they are going to do it in a way by which they show much premium, high-end products, higher price, higher value, more exclusivity, uniqueness, and so on. So we can say that the competitive strategy in the case of BMW is more differentiation-based compared to the Ford one, which is more cost-based. We can also take another example if we look at grocery stores. It's totally different if you purchased at Whole Foods in the United States, where they try to offer a unique experience, a unique shopping groceries experience, a lot of high premium products, high quality organic food. This is more a differentiation-based strategy compared to Walmart, which is more staples, basics, low end, low price, more affordable items. They are not going to show you any experience. They are going to give you any special thing. Just the staples, the basic things that you require, low price. So this is going to be a more cost-based approach. So having said that, the idea of cost-based versus differentiation of course, is totally linked to the idea of competitive advantage. All you know competitive advantage, which is the specific value system that makes a company different and unique, how we can identify assets or strengths or core capabilities that interlinked among each other and forming a system, they can really make that the company is different to others. They can sustain and underpin our competitive advantage. So when we talk about competitive advantage, we are talking about those activities, capabilities, processes that make my company better, my brand, my equipment, my technology, the location of my stores, my reputation, my sales force, things like that. But of course, not individually, but all making a system that really creates synergies, as for example, we have analyzed in previous cases like Groupon. But in addition, when we talk about competitive advantage, we need to understand not only about how we can create unique value, but how we can really serve and provide benefits to our customers. So competitive advantage is not only internally analyzed, but also externally when we say what specific benefits are we really giving to our customers? What specific problems are we solving to our customers? So we have to analyze competitive advantage of both sides. So the competitive advantage can be based on the cost, offering the best price like Walmart, or the competitive advantage can be more based on differentiation, uniqueness, exclusivity, premium, high quality, like Whole Foods, for instance, or like BMW versus Ford, Whole Foods versus Walmart, or other different comparisons that we can make. Of course, it's not the same, the iPhone versus other different smartphones that do not offer the same technology, capacity, touch screen, services, this or that. So this is what we are studying in this particular case. So let's start, first of all, for understanding the key aspects of competitive advantage and how these key aspects are related to the idea of competitive strategy. We have how we can measure value on this chart. And basically what you can see is the cost. We are adding a lot of activities. We are putting a lot of effort. These costs are based on payrolls, salaries, labor, advertising, the cost of purchasing materials. We are also paying utilities. We are paying the rent. We are making a lot of investments, a lot of expenses to get the cost. And finally, we can set a price. We will study in other videos about how can we set a price. But let's say that we are going to set an average price on the market, because when we set a price, we are also trying to understand our competitors' average price, just to be a little bit meeting them and being in the market and being competitive. So if you subtract what is the price minus the cost, we get a margin, okay? But in addition, we need to understand that we are creating value for customers. And when we create value for customers, we talk about the perceived value. The perceived value is the amount of value, how we can solve problems to our customers, how we bring special benefits, the amount of value that our customers receive. We call it perceived value, okay? And it's a little bit different from the margin. So when we talk about the company, we have internally the cost and the price that we are going to get when our product is sold. And we talk about the margin. This is the difference of subtracting price minus cost. But in addition, we can also add this difference between the perceived value by customers and the real price. A lot of customers, when they purchase a Samsung smartphone, they perceive much more value than the real price they are paying. Because most of the times, the average Samsung smartphone, it's very competitive and the price is really lower to what can be an iPhone. So these consumers perceive much more value than the price that they pay. We call it value added in this particular case. In general, if we take both and we add both, we have the margin which is the value that the company generates, revenue or price minus cost, and the value added, which is the value experienced by customers, perceived value minus price. In total, we have the value created. So we are going to use a little bit these components to explain what competitive strategy means on cost and based on differentiation. The BMW idea, differentiation, or the Walmart idea, which is more cost-based. So starting with the idea of cost, what you can see here is that the cost advantage, or we can call it also cost leadership advantage, consists basically on trying to reduce cost as much as possible. Obviously, we can think that what we want to do is become an efficient company. We want to get rid of all waste. We want to use only the cheapest materials. We try to reduce as much as possible the workforce. We try to be located in places that generate less payment in rent, and so on and so on. So the idea is that if a company wants to be competitive on cost, and a company wants to base its competitive advantage, what makes you different, on this idea of cost, okay, we are linking competitive advantage to competitive strategy. This is the company A that you can see in this chart that has a cost much more reduced than the cost of company B. So let's say that the cost of A is for the company Walmart, and the other cost is for the average of the industry. Applied to the Spanish case, the cost of A can be Mercadona, and the cost of the average industry would be the average of the other grocery stores or supermarkets, which that would be the company B. So as you can see, what we have is a company that has less cost than the others. This company, we call that it's very efficient, productive, because the cost is not only to try to purchase the less expensive materials or to try to hire the cheap labor workforce. It's also about how we can organize ourselves to become much more competitive, how we can get most with less investment, how are we more agile with our processes, how are we more efficient, or how we can reduce as much as possible waste. Now, the really important in this particular case is that the company A has a lower cost proportion than its direct competitors. But the really interesting thing is that it offers exactly the same price. So let's say that the two companies, A and B, or the company A versus the average of the industry, they are selling the product at the same price. So they are selling, for instance, whatever product, a liter of milk, and the milk costs €1. The cost for company A in blue is 75, and the cost for company B, or the average of the industry, is 85. So as you can see, the company that is capable of reducing as much as possible the cost can sell the product at the same price as the average of the industry, or at the same price than its direct competitors. And the result, the outcome, is that this company that is more efficient, productive, can get higher margin, can create more value for the company. When we say creating more value for the company, it means that we are getting more money, more cash, more profits. So we are increasing our shares, or we are providing more wealth for our owners, the capital owners. So this cost leadership advantage can be observed in many different companies on the market. We can say that Amazon is following this cost advantage. Walmart is following this cost advantage. To some extent, we can say that companies like Ford, it's also based on this cost advantage, at least if you compare them with the traditional premium automobile makers like BMW or Mercedes-Benz or other premium brands. Now, we can also think about the same idea when we apply this concept to all different industries, where we can see that there are companies like Ryanair, the low-cost carrier, the airline that can take us round trip London-Valencia only paying 50 euros, for instance. Why? Because they have a much more reduced cost in operations, cost on flight attendance, cost of many things, so they can give the same price or even less and having more margin than the average of the industry or more margin than the direct competitors. Now we can also think about this idea in a slightly different way if we have a look to the other chart that we have here, and we include also the perceived value by customers. So in this particular chart that I am now moving the mouse around, you can see that the company A has lower cost than company B. The company A can even lower the price. And even though the company A lowers the price, it gets even a higher margin than the company B. So not only you have to sell the product at the same price as the average of the industry or your competitor, you can also take in advantage of your superior cost structure, your superior lower cost. You can take this advantage and even reduce the price, maintaining the same margin as the competitors, or even you can reduce the price and show a higher margin than the competitors. The only point is that, as you can see in this example, company B has less margin than company A, but the company B is doing something a little bit different. It's including some way of trying to be a little bit different. And despite not getting the same margin as company A, this company B can improve the value added because the customers perceive that there is a little bit more value in its products. But in any case, as you can see, you can have lower cost, more margin, and even the same or more perceived value. This is the case, for instance, in this chart of Walmart. Walmart is so big and so efficient that they have the lowest possible cost structure in the grocery industry. That allows Walmart even to reduce prices while keeping the same or even higher margin than the industry. And customers that go to Walmart are very, very happy. They are really, really perceiving a lot of value because they can get more paying less. So as you can see, the value added in green, the perceived value minus the real price they pay, it's even the same as in company B. So the idea is that if we are following this cost-based strategy, this cost-based competitive advantage, we need to reduce as much as possible overhead cost. We need to really focus on efficient processes. We need to purchase in volume, and we need to make a lot of different activities aimed at lowering the cost as much as possible. For instance, I can tell you real examples where these companies that are trying to meet this lowest possible cost structure, like Zara, Inditex, they do not make commercials. They do not have expenses that are not aimed at lowering cost. Mercadona doesn't have any promotional activity. So the cost of marketing in Mercadona are zero. They do not invest in marketing because they consider that this is a non-necessary investment for reducing the cost structure. So the best way they can do for creating value is investing and taking a lot of expenses to reduce the cost, but not to try to invest in things that are not necessary in this particular case. We need to take into account that there are a lot of boundary conditions or conditions of application when and why and for what reason this cost advantage may work or not. I mean, we need to consider that customers sometimes are very price sensitive, like in the grocery stores, so the competitive advantage can work. We need to understand that when we have this cost-based competitive strategy, is in industries where the price is the most important element to compete on. When we talk about these industries, usually the products cannot be different. I mean, let me explain to you this in a very simple way. Milk is milk. So it's very, very different. It's very difficult to make consumers believe that the company's A milk is better than the company's B milk. It's just milk. So in this type of situations where the products are like commodities that they cannot be very different from each other, it's when price is the most important thing to compete, and companies should adopt this cost-based approach. Coffee with milk in any cafeteria, it's the same. It's the same coffee with the same espresso machine and the milk they add. So coffee is just coffee, so it's very complex to make it different. So cost advantage seems to be the most appropriate strategy. But of course, what about the Starbucks? What happens with Starbucks that is charging not $1 or $2, but $5 for a coffee? This is a way to understand that differentiation strategy can also be applied, and we are gonna watch it immediately. But before we go to that, let's finish in this case that the cost advantage is mostly observed in those industries where the products cannot be different, like a cafeteria. Products that very, very important, they compete on price. Customers are price sensitive, and of course, there are possibilities to be more efficient in cost. For instance, economies of scale. That means that the companies that are bigger can get lower prices. Let's go to understand this Starbucks example to understand the idea of differentiation. We have said that coffee is just coffee. So probably for any cafeteria, the cost advantage, trying to reduce the number of the waiters, trying to reduce the location of the cafeteria, trying to reduce the cost of materials, trying to reduce and bring to zero marketing or promotional efforts, and trying to purchase the furniture that it's the lowest possible price. That would make our cafeteria, okay, in this example, the most efficient as possible, okay, a cost-based structure, competitive advantage based on cost. But how Starbucks is doing things differently? Okay, companies can also use a different strategy where they can add more expenses, they can add more activities, different investments, and change from a commodity to a product that can be considered unique or different, or exclusive, or premium, or high-end. So this is exactly Starbucks. Starbucks probably is purchasing the same coffee as any other cafeteria in the world, but Starbucks is so big that they purchase in bulk, high volume, so they can get lower prices of coffee. And they decide that instead of trying to lower and lower and lower the cost, because they have a lot of volume, muscle, they are very strong when they purchase coffee and they can get probably the best price in the market. But they have decided to include more activities, to include more expenses in the equation, and to increase the cost. If they do that, it's because they want to be sure that the Starbucks cafeteria are located in the best possible prime street in any city. This, of course, is going to bring much more costs, expenses to the company, because they have to pay higher rent. They are going to hire much more workers, much more waiters than the average. So they will have a labor cost, the payrolls are going to be higher. They are going to spend a lot of money on promotion. They are going to make a lot of promotional ads, commercials. They are going to invest a lot in the ambience of the cafeteria, the most exclusive furniture, Okay? So this is going to make that Starbucks is going to have a really higher cost structure, and the only way they can compensate is increasing the price. This is what we have here, which is the differentiation advantage. So let's start with the beginning, understanding this Starbucks idea that would be exactly the same as Mercedes-Benz, BMW, or other high-end premium brands that are really following this different competitive advantage based on differentiation, trying to become different, unique, or exclusive in the market. So in this particular case, we have exactly the opposite to the previous one. What we have is that company A, in blue in this case, they have a higher cost structure. So company A can be Mercedes-Benz, or can be Starbucks, or can be Whole Foods. So they invest much more money on the same activities than the average of the industry, or they include new activities that the average of the industry is not doing. A lot of cafeterias are not spending money on commercials, promotions, and anything like that, but Starbucks does. So for instance, in this case, it's not only to pay more for the same, it's to pay for activities that the others don't do. So as you can see, the cost structure in blue is higher than the cost of company B, or the average of the industry. But the way that this company is getting revenues, the price, it's higher because investing or including more activities about marketing, promotion, finding the best prime locations downtown in any city, that makes possible to charge a higher premium price to customers. Of course, in this particular case, we need to understand that customers are not price sensitive, and they are ready to purchase a product that has a higher price as long as this product is going to give me more value, of course. So when you purchase a Mercedes-Benz or a BMW, or you want to buy organic food in Whole Foods, you know that you have much more value, and you are open to pay more if they give you more. So in this particular case, as you can see, we can charge a premium price because we have invested more in the manufacturing of the product or for delivering the service. The really important idea is that the company A that has a higher cost structure, that has much more expenses, can really get a higher margin because, and this is the very important thing, guys, the increase in the price is much higher than the increase in the cost. So, in other words, as you can see, the difference between the cost structure in blue compared to the cost structure in this kind of yellow, let's say that is $2 increase in the cost of delivering the service or manufacturing the product, but we can charge a higher price to our customers that really makes possible that our margin is going to be superior than the others. So in a very simple way, we can increase our cost $2, but the price is going to increase 8. So with this idea, even we have a higher cost, we have a so much higher price than the final margin for company A, for the differentiation-based company, it's going to be higher than the margin that has company B. So if we go to real examples, you can see that, for instance, when you purchase a Mercedes-Benz or a BMW, you purchase, this is just an example, instead of paying for an average sedan, instead of paying $30,000, you pay $45,000. So that means that you are paying $15,000 more, $15,000 or euros more compared to the average price of one sedan in the industry, because you think that you get more safety, technology, speed, social status, whatever, that makes you feel better paying more. But the point is that Mercedes-Benz or BMW, they charge 15,000 more, but the extra cost they have probably is 6 or 7,000. So they are getting a higher price compared to the increase in the cost structure. Therefore, they can get more margin. Putting differently, what I'm saying is that the percentage of increase in the final price that we achieve is much higher than the percentage of the cost that we have, because we are following this differentiation strategy. In this particular case, we are talking about industries or markets where you can really make your product different. So for instance, automobiles is not the same, of course, a Mercedes-Benz or a Ford. I mean, we don't know exactly how much good is one or another, but it looks more reliable, more a safer car, the Mercedes-Benz, than the others. We can also have the same idea here in the second chart, where you can see that we can increase a little bit in blue the cost over the yellow, a small increase, but the margin, the green part, looks higher than the increase in cost. So this is the same idea. We increase the cost 1, we increase the price 3, so the difference really pays off. And in addition, we can say that due to the investment that is made in a promotional campaign effort, or we are increasing our brand awareness, or we have invested a lot for increasing our technology, the perceived value in green, in this different green as the margin, it's even higher than average of the industry or the competitor B. So at the end of the day, you can see that the company A in blue, the value they create, the created value, it's much higher than the companies that are creating less value because they use a cost advantage. Now, in this particular case, differentiation is a strategy that works perfectly when you have room to make a product different. And that means that you can make your product more exclusive, more unique. The product is the same, but you add a lot of, for instance, promotional campaigns, commercials, ads, that consumers perceived. Maybe it's not real, but it's perceived, the value. And this is a very important thing, guys. Every time that we can see ads on colognes, perfumes, okay, like Chanel or like others that are very, very expensive, we are not sure that the real difference is real. But the idea is that in this particular thing, what we take into account is the perceived value by customers. This is something cognitive that we believe in, but we don't know whether this cologne, Chanel versus the Mercadona's cologne or the Walmart's cologne, is better or not in terms of chemistry. Maybe the lower cologne is much better than the premium one in terms of chemistry, the molecules and so on. But consumers perceive, and for this reason we have the perceived value, that they are buying something better, superior, more exclusive, this or that. So as you can see, we can get a lot of examples about differentiation in the automobile industry, the Mercedes-Benz, BMW, or other German manufacturers over the rest of competitors like Hyundai or other South Korean brands. And not only that, we can also see that there are a lot of industries and markets that looks like being just competitive advantage, like coffee, but then we see how Starbucks can really change the idea of coffee as a commodity, just a simple plain coffee, into something that becomes an experience, something that becomes really exclusive, premium, high-end, social status. If I drink this Nespresso, or if I drink this Starbucks, I feel superior, I feel better, I feel a winner, I feel whatever. We will study all these things in the marketing block, okay? where we are analyzing a little bit more the consumer, why the consumer purchases, the consumer's perceptions and things like that. But now in strategy, the idea is that you can understand these two approaches to be competitive. So we have seen that even in markets or industries like coffee, differentiation is possible with Starbucks. Even if we talk about airlines, in airlines, we traditionally used to have most of the airlines, the mainstream airlines, Lufthansa, American Airlines, Delta, Iberia, British Airways, Air France, all of them were a little bit more trying to compete on differentiation, giving a lot of customer service, flight attendants, a lot of things, services on board, of course increasing the price. And nowadays, at least in Europe, we are observing how the low-cost carriers like Ryanair are really changing the way we fly, are changing this exclusive differentiation-based approach by Lufthansa or Air France or Delta Airlines to offer a new way of flying, to offer a non-frills flight where you have a narrow leg room in the seat, a less comfortable seat, you have no flight service on board, you have no food, beverages on board, no frills at all, but you pay less. And they are really profitable, they are very competitive. So even in airlines, we can see both. The cost-based Ryanair and the most differentiation-based like Qatar or Air France or others. So nowadays, in most of the industries, we can observe both ways of competing, both ways, cost and differentiation, ways of offering different competitive advantages to different segments. So the idea is that we need to understand that this different approach, cost versus differentiation, has a different segment, a different group of consumers in that particular market. So of course, most of the people that travels through Ryanair are students, young people, or consumers that only want to travel weekends to go to Paris or London or anything like that. But when we see more executives, business people, which is a different segment, a different group of consumers in the customer market for airlines, they prefer much more conventional mainstream airlines like Lufthansa, Iberia, Delta, that are more exclusive, more services, more schedule. They offer you much more benefits. But we have both approaches. The same in automobile. We have the Mercedes-Benz on one side, we have cheap cars like Ford or Renault or Citroën or other European brands that are more on this cost-based strategy. Now, which one is best? What is best, to be low cost or to be differentiation? This is a very good idea. Cost-based needs volume. That means, as I have a smaller margin than in differentiation, I need to really have a lot of customers. While when I am in the differentiation approach, that means that my margin is higher so I can get less customers and being profitable. What I want to tell you is that, think about that. In a cafeteria in the university, for instance, we have a cafeteria in the university that the cost of the coffee is only €1, so the margin is very, very low. And we have a Starbucks that, let's say that the average price here in Spain is €3, so of course they have a very, very high margin. Which one is better? Both can be good if they are really coherent with your strategy. What does it mean? It means that Starbucks can get the same amount of profit, the same amount, with less customers. Starbucks is going to have less customers, but charging to each of them a higher margin because they charge a higher price. So let's say that if the margin in Starbucks is €2, with only 20 customers, they got €40, let's say, in an hour, okay? In a regular cafeteria that instead of having €2 of margin, they only have 20 cents, instead of getting 20 customers, they need 200 customers to get the same. So it's a different way of working. This cafeteria would be more in the university, the low cost, and they have a turnover which is much higher than the turnover in Starbucks. That means that the Starbucks can make money with a small number of customers because the margin is higher, and the cafeteria at the university is going to have a very slow margin but a lot of customers. So at the end of the day, they can make the same profits, have the same level of value, but on different bases. The cost advantage required volume, let's say large customers, and the differentiation requires more, let's say, less customers that spend more. So this is exactly the same when you say that, okay, Ford can sell triple cars than Mercedes-Benz, but Mercedes-Benz charges much more, gets higher margins, so at the end of the day they can get the same level of profit. There are industries where cost is the most important one, like groceries, and there are industries where the price is non-important and differentiation is the really important thing. For instance, cosmetics and all these healthcare things, most of the times they compete on more differentiation, higher margins. Let's compare, for instance, iPhones and Samsungs. iPhone has a higher margin than the other ones because they charge premium prices. And at the same time, Apple has a really, really high perceived value because people that purchases Apple, it's very loyal to Apple, and when they purchase a new one, they keep purchasing Apple. So this loyalty allows Apple to charge higher prices, and even though they have higher cost, they can get higher margins. But as you can see, every iPhone that you sell in the world, you sell 10 Samsungs or 10 other different brands. So the idea is that the Samsung ones, Samsung it's just an example, are more based on lower margin and more volume, selling much more. Apple can has higher margin and probably sell less, especially in the developing world, but still being profitable. Any company has to choose what they want to do. Their plan, their response to the environment, they plan to grow in a sustainable way, can be focused on cost, can be focused on differentiation. It all depends on the type of product that we want to generate, and it all depends on the particular segment, group of consumers that we want to position in our market. So there is no, let's say, a recipe. Companies can choose, and we can find very, very interesting ways by which industries or markets that traditionally were working on differentiation, now they can work on low cost. For instance, when we had the first EV, the first electric car, it was the Tesla. The Tesla S, that was the first and very, very high premium luxury EV that was really operational in the market. The price when they released the product was over $100,000, was very, very expensive. But now, of course, Tesla has lowered the price, but Tesla is an example of differentiation. Tesla is offering a lot of different things that other companies don't do. Services, connectivity, this or that. And that makes Tesla a player in the market that it's more based on differentiation. I very focus on the product, on the technology, on the exclusivity, the safety that we give you, the brand recognition of being the first, the pioneers in EVs, so they can charge a premium price. On the other hand, now we are observing that this market that looked like a market more based for differentiation now is being really attacked by the Chinese competitors, BYD, MG, and many other Chinese brands that are competing on EVs based on cost advantage. They are offering EVs that are starting with 20,000 and the Tesla one starts with 40,000. So as you can see, the same market, the same consumers, you have the cost-based approach by the Chinese, and you have the differentiation-based approach by Tesla, the American company. So both can be sustainable, both can be profitable, and both can make sense strategically as long as you fit to specific audiences. Obviously, the cheap, low-cost Chinese cars are going to be sold to more budget-oriented people, and the others are going to be sold to a different segment. Both strategies are okay. Tesla has to keep investing in promotion, technology, and things like that to keep making Tesla different, exclusive, high-end, premium. And the Chinese have to invest much more in cost. There are other different industries where the price cost base is the most important one. For instance, can be groceries, where most of the time the really important thing is price, except for some players like Whole Foods that looks much more an exception in the industry than the average of the industry. And there are other industries where differentiation is the most observed one, like in pharmaceuticals. All the pharma companies, they work on differentiation based on innovation, technology, patents. Think about Pfizer, for instance. They developed the COVID-19 vaccine. Others also did that. But that means extra cost. Why Pfizer has extra cost? Because Pfizer was investing a lot in research and development for getting this vaccine on time. So of course they have to charge a premium price. So they were not saying, okay, no, we only want to produce generic drugs without any brand that are just simple things like aspirins, okay? This is cost-based. This exists also in the pharma industry, but the most important one is the differentiation. So it depends on the market or the industry. You observe that one competitive advantage is more observed than others. But in general, in most of the industries, you can observe both playing at the same time. So we have group of companies working with differentiation, groups of companies working with cost advantage. The cost advantage requires volume, bulk. Walmart is the largest grocery store in the States. This big size is one of the reasons they have the lowest cost structure, because they purchase in bulk, and everything they do, they share the cost. So this can be the same as Whole Foods. The same, I mean, can be productive, can be high performance, but Whole Foods works on a different basis. More employees, more commercials, because they want to really get more exclusivity, uniqueness, brand recognition. So they employ much more people every store compared to Walmart, at least in a comparable figure. Let's say every square meter, the number of employees that Walmart has is going to be lower than the number of employees that Whole Foods has hired. So at the end of the day, they are going to have larger cost, but they are going to charge a higher price. So both can work at the same time. So there is no one single answer to say one is better than the other. It all depends on our strategy. It all depends on our market. It all depends on the industry and how we want to compete. Okay? So we can try to understand that when we are applying one or another, sometimes it cannot work because it needs really to be aligned with the environment. So sometimes the low cost doesn't mean low price. And the most important thing that I want to explain in the last minutes of this video is that we can also go for the middle. So what I have explained to you is the difference between cost-based and differentiation, let's say the two sides of the spectrum, right? But why not being in the middle? And to give you an example about being in the middle, we have considered Ford as a cost-based Mercedes-Benz as a differentiation based. What about Toyota? Toyota is a little bit in the middle. It's higher cost than Ford, probably, higher price, sure, less price, less perceived value by customers compared to BMW or Mercedes-Benz. So let's go for the middle. So we can position companies according to its competitive strategy in this strategy clock that we will explain in the class. Thank you so much for your attention.